Scientists are still baffled over the mystery of corn circles in fields in southern England. Anything from whirlwinds to UFOs.
Somewhere in a field tonight, the crop is standing perfectly still. By morning, it might not be. For 50 years, strange patterns have appeared in wheat fields across the planet. Overnight, in flawless geometry, in places no one was ever seen entering. So who is actually creating these strange circles? In early 2025, a team at Google fed every crop circle ever recorded, over 12,000 of them, into one of the most advanced AIs on Earth. They asked it one question: is there a pattern? What it found was not what anyone expected. It wasn't aliens, it wasn't a hidden symbol, and it wasn't a message, but it was something stranger, a progression, growing more complex every year, and accelerating. So what is really happening in these fields? And should we be worried about all this? Let's find out. It started with a circle. Crop circles are a strange kind of mystery. First and foremost, no one agrees on what they are. Second, they appear overnight, in fields that were untouched the evening before, discovered flattened and perfect by morning. And the most unusual part of it all is how they've changed. Because it didn't start this way. It started in the late 1970s, in the wheat fields of southern England. A region called Wiltshire, quiet farmland scattered with some of the oldest monuments on Earth. The first formations were simple, single circles, basic rings. Nothing more than flattened crop pressed neatly into the ground, usually found in the morning by a farmer walking his field. They were odd, but they were easy to ignore. For a while, that's exactly what happened. But then something shifted. By the 1980s, the circles were no longer just circles. They came back with rings inside rings. Then geometric shapes. Then patterns that seemed almost designed. They grew larger. They grew more frequent. And they stopped staying in England. Formations began appearing in Germany, the Netherlands, Canada, Australia, and dozens of other countries around the world. Then came the 1990s. And this is where it got strange. The simple circles had become massive pictograms, elaborate designs stretching across entire acres of farmland. Some contained sacred geometry. Others featured intricate fractal patterns, and some even displayed mathematical relationships so precise that researchers struggled to explain how anyone could have created them, let alone in a single night. Whatever this was, it wasn't slowing down. It was escalating. And as the formations grew more complex, so did the question hanging over them. Who or what was making them? For years, no one had a convincing answer. Until two men stepped forward and claimed they had won. Two men and a plank. In 1991, it seemed like the mystery was finally solved. Two British men, Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley, came forward with a confession. They said they had been making crop circles for years, not a few, hundreds of them, and they'd been doing it since 1978, right around the time the very first formations appeared. Their method was almost embarrassingly simple. They would step into a field at night, press the crop flat, and walk away. By morning, another mysterious formation would be waiting to be discovered. To prove it, they did it in front of journalists. They walked into a field, took out their tools, and created a formation right there, while the cameras rolled. And for many people, that settled it. Crop circles were a hoax. At least that's what we told ourselves. Mainstream science moved on, and so did everyone else from these circles. But there was a problem, because the confession didn't stop the circles. They kept appearing, more of them, in more countries, at a faster rate than ever before. And here's the part that no one could quite explain. The formations that appeared after 1991 were more complex than anything Bauer and Chorley had ever made. Some contained hundreds of individual elements, others followed precise mathematical relationships, and some were so intricate that recreating them by hand seemed to require a massive team, working at impossible speed, in complete darkness, and finishing everything before sunrise. 2 men with a plank couldn't do that, and a few of them were stranger still. So the confession answered one question, and quietly opened a much bigger one. Yes, people made crop circles, but had people made all of them? For decades, that question sat unanswered, too strange for science to take seriously, too persistent to fully disappear. Until, years later, a small group of engineers decided to stop guessing and let a machine look at this problem instead. The AI analysis. It was early 2025. Inside Google's DeepMind division, a small research team ran an experiment that wasn't part of any official project. It was a group of engineers, people who had been quietly fascinated by the crop circle phenomenon for years, and they decided to do something no one had done before. They were going to feed the entire mystery to an AI. They used Google's most advanced pattern recognition system, the kind of AI built to find hidden structure in massive amounts of data that no human could ever process alone. And they gave it everything. Over 12,000 crop circle images. Every documented formation they could gather from the past 50 years, pulled from databases maintained by researchers all over the world. And whether it had been confirmed as human-made, or whether it remained unexplained. Along with all this, scientists fed the AI everything they could find about each formation, the soil composition of the field, the weather conditions, and dozens of other variables layered on top. Then they gave the AI one simple task: find the patterns. It looked for things that kept repeating, things that human researchers might have missed by studying each crop circle on its own. That was it. There were no theories, no assumptions, no looking for aliens, just a machine, looking at 50 years of crop circles all at once, searching for anything they had in common. And here's what the engineers expected. If the AI found anything at all, they assumed it would be one of 2 things. Maybe it would find proof that the formations were simply hoaxes created by humans, repeated tool marks, human signatures, or the unmistakable fingerprints of people working with boards and rope. Or maybe, if they were being hopeful, it might find something buried in the geometry, a hidden symbol, a message, some kind of code left behind in the crops. Those were the possibilities they were prepared for. But when the results came back, it wasn't either of them. It wasn't a hoax signature. It wasn't a message. It was something far stranger than anyone expected. The unusual pattern. The pattern the AI found did not involve aliens, but it also wasn't something as simple as finding the same shapes over and over again. A design made in one field could share a mathematical structure with another created years later. A small formation could contain the same proportions found inside a much larger one, and shapes that looked purely artistic could follow rules that appeared again somewhere else. That was the strange part. The formations were separated by distance, time, and sometimes entire countries, yet certain details kept returning. The AI began treating every formation almost like a piece of a much larger puzzle. It wasn't asking what one circle meant. It was asking whether thousands of them were following the same underlying rules. And the more formations it compared, the harder it became to dismiss those similarities as isolated choices. There was another detail. The pattern wasn't limited to the designs themselves. Something similar appeared when the AI compared when the formations appeared and where they were found. Certain locations kept coming up. Certain periods showed unusual concentrations. And some of the strongest similarities appeared in formations that had seemingly nothing to do with one another. That didn't prove that someone or something was deliberately creating them. It simply meant the old explanation of random pranks was no longer enough to describe everything the data was showing. The AI had turned thousands of strange photographs into one enormous data set. And for the first time, researchers could see the phenomenon as a whole. What they saw wasn't one mystery. It was several unusual signals appearing at the same time. Now, think about what that actually means. If crop circles were nothing more than hoaxes, you would not expect this. You'd expect randomness. Some years simple, some complex, some clever, some clumsy. But that's not what the AI found. It found a direction. Whatever was making them was learning, getting better, adding more information each time, deliberately increasing the complexity of whatever it was trying to say. The AI couldn't tell the researchers which answer was true, but it could do something else. It could show them the clues, and it wasn't just one or two. There were 4 clues, each one stranger than the last. The 4 clues. The first thing the AI found was in the geometry itself. When it sorted the formations by date, a clear line appeared. The earliest circles from the 1970s were basic, simple rings, plain shapes. By the late 1980s, they had grown into overlapping circles and geometric grids. By the 1990s, they were incorporating fractals, Fibonacci sequences, and mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio. And by the 2000s, the formations were referencing concepts that even specialists struggled to decode. Hyperdimensional geometry, non-Euclidean mathematics. Ideas pulled from the edge of quantum physics. The geometry wasn't just getting bigger, it was getting smarter. But that wasn't the strangest part. The second finding was the mathematics buried inside the shapes. Certain relationships appeared again and again, too consistent to be coincidence. The golden ratio showed up in the spirals and proportions, fractal structures repeated at smaller and smaller scales. And some formations contained arrangements that could be read as binary code, ones and zeros pressed into wheat. In one case, near Chilbolton, England, a formation appeared that seemed to mimic a message humanity had beamed into space in 1974. But with the details changed, as if something were sending a reply. The AI flagged 127 formations containing encoding like this. And it calculated that the odds of these relationships appearing by pure chance were, in its words, statistically negligible. But that still wasn't the strangest part. The third finding was in where and when the circles appeared. They weren't spread evenly. Over 40% of all documented formations appeared within 50 miles of Stonehenge. More than 60% appeared within a mile of an ancient sacred site. And the timing followed a pattern too. Then the AI found something abrupt. In 1990, formation complexity didn't just rise, it jumped. Before that year, formations averaged 3 to 5 distinct elements. After it, the average leapt to 15 or 20 and kept climbing. The shift happened in a single season, and it held across every country at once, as if something had changed everywhere, all at the same time. And still, that wasn't the strangest part. The fourth finding wasn't in the geometry at all. It was in the plants. When researchers examined the crops inside certain formations, they found something mechanical flattening could not explain. The soil beneath some formations held magnetic particles that shouldn't have been there. And in a few, the flattened crop kept growing, horizontally, alive and unbroken, as if it had never been harmed at all. These anomalies weren't random. They clustered, showing up most often in the most complex formations. If every circle was made with boards and rope, these physical changes shouldn't exist. But in a small subset of them, they did. 4 findings. Any one of them was strange on its own. Together, they told the researchers something they weren't ready to hear. Because when the AI combined all 4 and measured how they were changing over time, it uncovered a 5th thing. And this was the finding that truly disturbed the researchers the most. The clock is running. The 5th finding wasn't a single pattern. It was what happened when the AI combined the other 4. It asked a different kind of question. Not what do these formations look like, but how much information could each one actually hold? So it measured that information. It calculated the theoretical amount of data that could be encoded in each formation. And then it plotted that number across 50 years. And what appeared was a curve. The earliest formations carried almost nothing, simple shapes, no real information at all. But as the decades passed, the amount of data the formations could hold kept climbing. And by the 2000s, the most complex ones could encode a genuinely significant amount of information. That alone was strange. But it was the shape of the curve that stopped the researchers cold. The information density wasn't rising in a straight line. It was accelerating. The formations weren't just becoming more complex. The rate at which they were becoming more complex was itself speeding up. Each leap was bigger than the last. Each step came faster than the one before it. And when the AI projected that curve forward, it produced a prediction. If the progression continued at its current rate, then somewhere between 2030 and 2035, the formations would reach a threshold. A point where their information density would match that of human written language. A point where a crop formation could, in theory, encode a message complex enough to be clearly, definitively decoded. Sit with that for a moment. Whatever is behind this pattern, whoever or whatever, is only a few years away from being able to say something we could actually read. And this is exactly what disturbed the research team, because random hoaxes don't usually do this. It would mean people were working together, making each formation more complex every year. Or it could mean something else was behind it. The AI couldn't tell them who made them. It could only tell that the curve was real and measurable, and that it was pointing at a date now less than a decade away. So the researchers were left staring at the same question the world had been avoiding for 50 years. Only now, it had a deadline attached. Who is actually doing this? The final verdict. After all the analysis, comparisons, and patterns the AI uncovered, the researchers were left with 3 possible answers. The first was the simplest. It was all human. Every formation, from the first circles in the 1970s to the most complex designs today, could have been made by people. And the growing complexity might simply mean that hoaxers were getting better, learning from older formations, sharing ideas, and raising the bar year after year. It's possible, but it raises some difficult questions. You would still have to explain the bent but unbroken stems, the unusual particles found in some soil samples, and crops that continued growing after being flattened. You would also have to explain formations appearing overnight, sometimes with no obvious footprints, paths, or equipment left behind. And then there is the biggest question of all. How could a global trend continue for 50 years across different countries and different groups of people without any clear leader or organization behind it? The second answer is the one most people immediately think of. Maybe some of them weren't made by us. Perhaps a small number of formations were created by a non-human intelligence, and the growing complexity was that intelligence learning how to communicate with us. It sounds strange, but there is one detail that makes the idea interesting. Many formations use mathematics. Math doesn't belong to one language or culture. If an intelligence wanted to communicate with a species it had never met, mathematics could be a logical place to begin. There is no proof of this, but it remains one possible explanation. And then there is the third answer. Maybe the source is us, but not in the way we think. Some researchers, including biologist Rupert Sheldrake, have suggested that crop circles could somehow be connected to human consciousness. The idea is controversial and is not accepted by mainstream science. But supporters argue that it could explain why some formations appear near ancient sites, or why their designs seem to reflect the knowledge and ideas of their time. Three possibilities: humans, something non-human, or something within ourselves. So maybe the strangest thing about crop circles isn't how they appear. It's what happens when you stop looking at them one at a time. Because when thousands of formations are placed together, they begin to tell a very different story. And the biggest question is no longer who made them, but where that story is heading. So, after hearing it all, what do you think? Who is really behind these strange formations? Human hands? Something else? Or something we don't yet understand? Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more strange stories like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.